Franchise Business Secrets, and excited today to have on Kris Neib, who is a franchise expert in his own right. Actually, Kris works with us at the Franchise Evolution Partners Group as our development partner of choice, and he's an expert on franchising. So I thought I would have Kris on today and just talk about all things franchising. So Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And you're coming to us out of Denver, Colorado, correct?
Yes, sir.
Give us a little bit about your background in franchising and how you find yourself today working with a bunch of different franchisors, Iron Child included.
Mm-hmm. I started in my franchise career about 30 years ago, actually. My anniversary is coming up here at the end of this year. So it's fun to say, been there, done that, seen that, because you do see a lot in 30 years in franchising in general, but it's been a ride. We've seen brands grow. We've seen brands go from small units to large units, larger units to larger units. So yeah, we've seen a lot in franchising. It's been a lot of fun.
And you and I spent some time at a similar franchise brand, my first one, Fitness Together. You spent some time there, so we've known each other quite a while. Talk about why someone would consider a franchise versus doing something on their own. I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about why you would consider franchising, but I think largely people don't understand how much of the U.S. economy and the world economy is driven by franchise brands. So there's obviously something to this. Why would someone consider franchising?
You know, the big one in franchising is it's a proven model. So it's not to pick on you per se, but you spend a lot of money to prove out a system. And when somebody goes and does it for their first time on their own, they don't know the ins and outs of opening any type of business. They don't know what it's like to sign a lease, to negotiate a lease, to deal with construction, to deal with permitting with cities. So when somebody comes into franchising, the idea behind that is having a proven business model step by step and a good business partner that's going to hold your hand all the way from signing that first lease to getting that first customer in the door to then ultimately managing their business. That's why franchising is so successful across the board, is because someone has already gone out there and proven the business model up front.
So I know I've seen somewhere, and I can't remember the exact stats, but the stats of someone opening, hanging the shingle, creating their own business, whether it's fitness or doing hair, I think the success rate when the first 5 years is pretty dramatically low. Like, I think it's like less than 10%. Do you know those stats?
It is less than 10%, and based on the industry, it actually goes less than 5 pretty quick. Restaurants are a horrible but a good example, right? Because everyone's got their grandmother's secret sauce that they love and the world needs to taste. Less than 5%. That's a real hard one to build into. Other retail businesses, fitness is another big one, where less than 10% because they might have a better way of doing it versus understanding what it's going to take at scale. So less than 10% is it's a scary number, but it's a very real number for people to be successful in a business that's not franchise specific or franchise related.
Okay, so then on the flip side, when you align with a franchise brand, do you know those success rates over the same time period of 5 years?
It's pretty high as well. I mean, that flips over, but it's going to be, again, based on the franchisor at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at the longevity of a franchisor and what their experience is to build and grow their business to ultimately get it to where they are, to ultimately then scale their business location after location after location. So you're almost flipping those numbers around to say the success rate is a lot higher based on that franchisor and their commitment to their system.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reason that is you can go into a business because you love the product. Like, I was a fitness guy. I went into fitness because I love fitness, and then realized real quickly there was a whole ton of stuff I knew nothing about. To your point, negotiating leases and marketing and finance and all the different areas of business, right? And so I guess it's vintage E-myth that just because you love the product, in fact, that can actually hurt you because then you'll default to doing the product and all the business stuff. How does aligning with the franchise and your experience and the franchisors you work with, how does that help an entrepreneur who may have a passion for the product actually be able to run a better business because they get the business system?
It's one of the hardest things, and let's compare food to fitness, and that's a horrible example because they're obviously two different industries, but people might like the taste of a sandwich but hate being in a restaurant and not have the support that they ultimately need to build and grow their business. So we can go E-Myth, we can go Millionaire Next Door, we could throw out 10 different books right now on how to build and grow. It really does come down to the systems. And so when the research is done up front to make sure the right processes and systems are in place to grow the business, it takes care of itself at that point in time. It really does.
You know what system stands for?
Go ahead, tell me.
Save yourself time, effort, and money.
I did not disagree with that.
I mean, isn't that great? I don't know. I hardly ever hear people say that, but that's exactly what it does. And, I think about how many times we go back. In fact, I was just sitting in a meeting where we have a whole quarterly rock that my whole team was working on to go back into a system that was developed 5 years ago and re-engineer it and rebuild it. And I just think at every layer of business, it's amazing to me how much of it comes down to systemization, and it's never done. My point with that is you're always working to make your systems better and make sure they're still working, because what worked 5 years ago may not work today. And so again, I just think a lot of people, when they go into business, they just don't realize the complexity of things that have to be consistently and systematically done over time.
It's interesting is I'll give a compliment to a team member of yours, Karen, who at the conference said something that was perfect. Your job as an executive or a business owner is to always find better systems and better support tools for your team itself. If you're not continuously looking into better systems and better ways to help your team build and grow your business, you're going to just be stagnant, if not go down. And so you're always looking for ways to improve. Even if you have to go backwards to go forwards, it's a big piece in running a business every single day.
Absolutely. So another great book, since we're talking about books that I loved and changed my life, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. And I read it at 22 years old. I was a busy personal trainer. I was making good money, but it was the first time I realized, oh, I'm trading time for money. Mm-hmm. And there's a finite amount of hours in the day. I was definitely feeling that because I was working early and I was working late and I wasn't seeing my wife much. But there's also a finite amount of what you can actually pay an hour to get a customer, or charge an hour to get a customer to pay. And you're constrained by those two things. So what you need is leverage. And there's a couple different ways to get leverage. You can get it through real estate. You can get it through building a business. In fact, if you've read any of Robert Kiyosaki's books, he's got like 100 of them. They all say the same thing: make money in business, invest in real estate. That's his whole equation. So anyway, here I was at 22 years old. I'm like, I have no leverage. I am the leverage. And so I think what's interesting is business gives you the ability to build leverage. But even beyond that, when you're a part of a franchise system that's growing and doing the right things, it actually gives you more leverage, where you're building something that's beyond trading time for money. Now you have actually something to sell, right? And so that's something that you and I touched on recently at our annual convention, of being a part of a growing system helps everyone. All, tides lift all boats there. Talk about how being a part of a system can actually help build equity in your business and something you can sell eventually.
We'll go to that word leverage again, right? You're, as a franchisee, able to leverage the franchisor and their experience and their time and their resources, because a good franchisor is going to continuously do that over and over and over again. And that's going to be the important part into this. So when you're changing your systems, or you're changing your pricing, or you're changing different things, marketing programs as an example, it's giving that franchisee an opportunity to be successful as a franchisee of the franchisor system, to leverage their time better to ultimately grow a bigger business faster. So there are a lot of franchisors out there that do not do those types of things. So when you see a franchisor that does that, it just shows that the long-term success is absolutely going to be there, because the franchisor is continuously investing back into their business model and their systems to grow a bigger business.
Do you have any success stories that you've seen of franchisees who were able to grow within a system and then have an exit, either when the franchisor exited or at some other point in that journey? Do you have any of those examples?
It happens a lot. I mean, what you see now with systems, and it's the world that we play in, is the big franchisors start having larger equity groups that come in and want to acquire them, to help them grow on top of where they are. You're seeing private equity groups come in and buy franchisees' businesses now, or larger area developers that will want to buy up all the franchisees in a certain geographical area. It's fun to say it happens every single day, but it happens a lot in franchising. And the reason why it happens in franchising, and think of it as an investor, they're looking for that solid return. Well, if you have a solid royalty stream, they know month over month what that number is going to look like. That's a real big deal for an investment group, not knowing if interest rates are going to change or if their home equity is going to go up or down based on what's going on in the market. So for a private equity group to come in or an investor profile to come in, they love franchising because it's a consistent percentage month over month over month. And we see it every single day.
So my stepdad, who I call Dad, as you know, is a successful franchisor. And one story I like to tell is it was actually his son, so my stepbrother, his son's soccer coach came to him and said, "Man, I need an opportunity in my life." And so, long story short, he moves from Birmingham to Atlanta to become a franchisee of Express Oil Change.
Yeah.
He ends up going on to own 19 units in Atlanta. And when Ricky sold the business 2 years ago, he exited with Ricky. So we got the multiple that Ricky got at the big level on his 19. And let's just say former soccer coach did pretty well hitching his wagons and aligning to the Express Oil Change. So, not only did he build some phenomenal units, but he got to leverage the eventual multiple that the whole company sold for. So just another example of leverage that a lot of times you're not thinking of when it's, hey, should I hang a shingle and do my own thing, or should I align with a franchise corporation?
And stories like that are the reason why you do this, right? Like, you could say my passion plays a soccer coach, and then I went and built a business, and guess what? He might be a soccer coach again. But
actually, he's trying to make the PGA Tour now.
Well, there you go.
But he's got the time and the money to do it.
There you go. Right? So, but it's fun stories like that just show if you follow the recipe that's proven step by step by step. That's a perfect example of somebody who said, hey, I need something more. I need something more for my family. I'm willing to put blood, sweat, and tears into it. How do I get there? And then having a great mentor, i.e. the franchisor that took him step by step by step to get him there. And you'll see systems that are willing to do that. You'll see some franchisors that are very corporate driven, that aren't necessarily as hands on. That's okay too. They've got a recipe for success. But stories like that are the stuff that make you feel good about the franchise industry because they're there every day. They are absolutely there every day.
Yep. And again, I've already touched on this, but the energy and the time and the effort to go in and create every single system and software and SOP and position agreement, it's exhausting. Yeah. At this point in my life, if I were to start over at 47 years old, I think I would buy a business versus start a business. Honestly, logo creation and IP protection, and it's endless of what has to be done if you're truly going to grow and scale a business. Yeah. It's just never ending. All right, so let's talk about kind of 10,000 foot franchise industry. Let's talk more specifically around Iron Tribe. So we've partnered with you guys. You're doing our franchise development. So talk a little bit about what that means and then why you chose to align with us, because I know you work with quite a few brands and kind of have your pick of who you might work with.
We're very careful and very specific into who we work with. We're fortunate that we can do that because of some financial partners that we have. But we spend a lot of time to make sure you are willing to do those things, that you are willing to put blood, sweat, and tears into your business to continue to grow it. If you look behind you right now, the fact that you live your brand vision every single day, that's a big deal for us as a development company to make sure we do align with the right partners. I look to make sure it's a successful business, franchisees are happy, and they're following your path first and foremost, but that you're continuously growing on your systems. So it's fun that we started the conversation out with systems and tools, but when you see a franchisor that's willing to continuously grow and grow and grow and live their brand, we adapt to that pretty quickly and make sure we put the right systems and tools in place to support that, to help you build and grow your business the way that you expect to grow it.
And one thing we talked about is in order to grow a healthy brand, you have to have what's called validation, right? And there has to be, let me back up. The only way to be successful as a franchisor is to have success at the store level. If I've learned anything from Ricky, my dad, he's drilled that into my head, is everything comes down to success at the store level. So no amount of crazy marketing or great sales development skills from your group can compensate from gyms that aren't making money or from franchisees who aren't happy doing what they're doing or feeling supported doing what they're doing. Right. So talk a little bit about validation and just what you've experienced being a part of our culture over the last year.
We'll go back to a comment you just made about I would buy a business versus building a business, knowing it's hard work, right? And when somebody brand new is coming in and they're thinking through buying a business, it's the, oh my gosh, do I have time to do this? Oh my gosh, what happens when something negative happens? Well, if the franchisor's been there, done that, they've got a system and a response to what that is. And so when we talk about validation, why it's so incredibly important is it is that unit economics at the store level. Is that franchisee that's going to be just like me starting out a business going to be successful? Have they been successful? Is the marketing there? Where are my customers going to come from? So we look a lot into what is the validation like before we ever work with a franchisor. We want to make sure that the franchisees are following your path and they're happy with that path. We got to know a lot of your franchisees at the conference, and prior to even working with you, we only heard positive things. And it was, yeah, this is hard work, but these guys are willing to do what it's going to take to get us there. And you have a lot of people that are willing to follow that path, and they're very successful at doing that, which is why validation is so incredibly important, especially when somebody's investigating your business. They need to hear from somebody who's doing this every single day. Gosh, we just changed our pricing. What was that like? Gosh, we've got a new social media campaign. What was that like? Gosh, we've got a new rock, as an example. What was that like to implement that at the franchisee level? Some of the manager meetings that you all do. I mean, that was a very big thing to understand how competitive they are, which is fun. But more importantly, that those systems and tools are in place for them to be successful with their business. So hearing it from a franchisee who paid to do it, they were in somebody else's shoes before when they weren't a franchisee, is a very, very big deal, because it just shows if you follow this playbook and you follow this recipe, you can be successful. So validation is a very big deal.
Yeah, and so I think we were talking before the show even started. We had a discovery day yesterday at Candidate in town, and one of our franchisees went to dinner with him, and we didn't even know about it. I mean, that says a lot that he would take time on a Sunday night and take a stranger to dinner and talk about the brand, right?
That absolutely says a lot about the brand itself and the franchisees that are part of your system. If they're willing to take somebody out to dinner on a Sunday night, which is family time for a lot of us, it shows that they really do care about the business model and they care about the brand itself to see if they want somebody new to join their club. And that's how franchisees that are building systems really act. This is their business. They want to make sure that these are the right types of people for their business itself. And that's a real big deal. That's a real big deal that they were willing to do something like that. Most franchise systems, you won't see that in. But when you do, it makes you feel really good about the people that you're working with, because it just shows that they do care about the model itself.
Yeah, I love when those validation calls happen, or they go to coffee, or they talk, and then I get a text and say, hey, he's our people. He's good, And it just feels good. They know what our culture is. They know who fits our brand, and that's someone they want involved. Or they'll be like, hey, I mean, honestly, it felt like this guy was just all about the money. All he asked about was money questions. Not sure it's going to be a fit. So they really help us, too, know if we got a candidate, someone that we want to partner with, right?
Well, and this sounds strange, but you want to get to know. It's a really strange way of putting this. So if the franchisees don't feel it's a fit, or the executive team doesn't feel it's a fit, sometimes it's not the right fit for a candidate, and they don't know how to say that. So when we say get to a know, there's nothing wrong with that. You can focus on the ones that want to say yes and be part of your system. And that's a big deal. That becomes a big part of the education process to identify the right types of franchisees for the system. I think a part that we don't talk about enough is when we aligned with you, it was you want the right type of franchisee. You want the right type of people for your system. It isn't hey, they can write a check and fog up a mirror. They're the right fit for us. You're not going to bring them into your system. And so when validation's done right, yes, it teaches a candidate about the business model itself, but it also becomes a tool to identify the right types of people for their system, to say, hey, these are our people, or gosh, this is not the right guy for us, the right gal for us. That's the whole point of validation, to find the right types of people for the system to be successful.
All right, so someone listening to this show, if they're considering why they may or may not franchise a business,
Mhm.
like maybe they're in business and they want to grow and scale, and they're thinking through, do I really want to do this again and again, or would I rather align? Or maybe they're not in business and they want to be in business.
Yeah.
What would your recommendation be? And it could be in fitness, or it doesn't matter. Just
Yeah.
what's your recommendation when someone asks you that type of question?
You got to do your research. You got to put the time in, because if you're gonna build a business, it isn't, hey, I just signed a franchise agreement and I'm gonna go join the PGA Tour tomorrow, right? Or I'm gonna go golfing tomorrow. You've got to know you're still building a business. It's blood, sweat, and tears. It really is. It's hard work regardless. Because even though the franchisor will have the right systems in place, you still got to implement them. You still got to follow them. And it does take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And so if you're willing to do it, you could end up with 19 locations, in the example that was used before, or 5 or 6 fitness facilities, because that's what franchisees in your system are working towards and doing already. But you still have to put the time in. So doing the research up front and following the process that's outlined for an individual up front, if you can follow that process step by step by step to see if it makes sense to become a franchisee of that system, that means you can follow a process step by step by step to be successful as a franchisee in the system itself as well.
Yeah, and to your point, Jamie, who's been on the show, is about to open his 7th in Nashville. Has heard me tell that story. He's like, "Yep, I'm going to be that guy for Iron Tribe." Yeah, we have franchisees building multiple units. One day, another thing Kiyosaki says all the time is the only reason to build a business is to one day sell it, right?
Yep.
Unless you're going to bring family in, which is a whole nother show. We'll maybe talk about it another time. But yeah, there's just that ability to come in and be a part of that growth is exciting. Well, Kris, thanks for coming on. I think this has been educational.
Absolutely.
A lot of people just don't know just how pervasive actually franchising is. I mean, it's always interesting to me when I pull into a strip center. I like to count like how many mom and pops and how many franchises, and typically it's 80 to 85% franchising, because they have lasting value, where the mom and pops are kind of in and out. So it's been educational, and appreciate you spending a little time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.